Hi, and welcome to Dynamics of Persuasion, Introduction to Persuasion, Part A. Here's where we're going. We're going to define persuasion, talk about the foundations of persuasion, talk about the difference between persuasion and coercion, define some communication effects, and of course look at the historical and contemporary overview of the study of persuasion and argumentation. What do you think persuasion is? Think about it. When have you persuaded someone else? When have you been persuaded? What is persuasion? Persuasion is just about anything that involves molding or shaping attitudes. This could be positive or negative. Persuasion is the study of attitudes and how to change them. More specifically, persuasion is a symbolic process in which communicators try to convince other people to change their attitudes or behaviors regarding an issue through the transmission of a message in an atmosphere of free choice. Here are the 5 components. Persuasion is a symbolic process. It involves a conscious attempt to influence. Important word there is conscious. It has to be intentional influence. People persuade themselves. Persuasion involves the transmission of a message, and of course it requires a free choice. These are the 5 components of our definition of persuasion. Hopefully this looks familiar to some people. This is the Semiotic Triangle, and it's reinforcing the fact that persuasion is a symbolic process. You have the relationship between the symbol and its referent, which is the actual thing that the symbol stands for, and of course the tenuous connection to the thought or reference that symbol refers to in the head of the receiver or source. So again, the word is dog, the actual referent is the dog, right? The symbol is the word dog, and the thought that you have in your head is the picture of a particular kind of dog, or maybe something else. Again, persuasion involves a conscious attempt to influence. It has to be conscious. It has to be an attempt that is intentional. Otherwise, we don't call it persuasion, we call it something else. Driven by hunger, a fox tried to reach some grapes hanging high on the vine, but was unable to, although he leaped with all his strength. As he went away, the fox remarked, "Oh, you aren't even ripe yet. I don't need any sour grapes." People persuade themselves the same way that Aesop's fox persuaded himself. Marcus Aurelius famously argued, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Persuasion involves the transmission of a message. Persuasion requires free choice. If you don't have free choice, persuasion can't exist. Persuasion involves the persuader's awareness that he or she is trying to influence someone else and requires the persuadee to make a conscious or unconscious decision to change his or her mind about something. Animals and infants can't persuade by our definition because they are not consciously aware that they're persuading. Persuasion has moral components. We choose to engage in morally beneficent and morally reprehensible actions. Rhetoric was the art of public persuasion. Sophists, which were teachers of rhetoric, and the word sophist comes from the Greek word sophos, which actually means knowledge. Plato contributed a lot of ideas, as did Aristotle. And what Aristotle did, and one of the reasons why he's called the father of our discipline, is because he was able to reconcile the differences between the positions of Plato and the sophists. The sophists argued for every argument an equal and opposite argument existed. They also argued that humanity is the measure of all things and that rhetoric is ideally responsible. Plato disagreed. He argued that truth is absolute and only philosopher kings can know the truth. He argued that rhetors could not be trusted because our perceptions of truth often change, unless, of course, you're a philosopher king, as he described in the Allegory of the Cave. The Allegory of the Cave describes how only philosopher kings can access the truth. Plato was a philosopher king, so he could tell the Allegory of the Cave because he was able to access the truth. He argues that humanity is really trapped in a cave, being forced to stare at shadows dancing on a wall. These shadows are created by a fire behind those individuals that they are unable to see. In between the fire and the outside of the cave, there's a low-hanging wall, and outside of the cave, you have the true ideal versions of things, in other words, truth. When you and I look at a cow, we don't really see the true version of a cow. We see the shadow version of a cow. We're unable to see the true version of a cow because we're not philosopher kings. Whereas Plato, being able to venture outside the cave to see what truth is, where truth is, and discover truth that is absolute, he's able to tell the difference between a true cow and the dancing shadows that we think we see when we see a cow. I encourage you to Google the Allegory of the Cave for more information about Plato's famous allegory. Rhetoric was defined by Aristotle as the faculty of finding the available means of persuasion in any given situation. He believed that truth has a natural tendency to prevail over its opposites. Aristotle came up with 3 proofs that are important to understand for our discipline. The first was ethos, and this deals with the nature of the communicator, the ethic. Whenever you think about ethos, think ethics. Pathos dealt with the emotional state of the audience, or the use of emotion by the persuader. So when you think about pathos, think about emotion. Logos stands for logic and how those message arguments are constructed. So when you think logos, think logic.